I've received a purchase invoice from one of my suppliers, so now I want to enter it into Xero. So I'm going to go to Accounts and Purchases. Then we have this new button here. So if I click on that, we're taken to a template and need to enter the information from the purchase invoice into Xero. So first of all, who is it from? It's actually from a supplier I've used before. So as I start typing the supplier, it pops up in a list underneath the field. If it was a new supplier, I'd need to type in the whole name, and then once I'd approved the invoice, it would actually be saved as a new contact. Then I need to enter the date that's on the invoice. Now I can do it this way with dots between the numbers of the date, or I can do / between the numbers, or I can choose from the drop down calendar, or if I did tab through this date, it would be put today's date. And then I move to the due date. Now, if I'd set up some defaults in the system, the due date would pop up automatically, but there are no defaults set up. So again, I need to type the due date in, and it says on my invoice, actually it's to be paid within 30 days. So if I put plus 30, Xero will calculate that for me. Now the reference box is a free type box, but I would normally put in the invoice number that's on this purchase invoice. So if I put invoice, this is exactly what's on the invoice I've received. Now where this paper icon is with the corner turned down means that I can upload a copy of this purchase invoice and attach it to this purchase invoice that I'm creating. So I can scan it into my computer and then upload the file, or if I'd been sent it by PDF, I can save the PDF and upload it here as well. If I'd uploaded it into my digital files library, I can attach it from there. Now this is the premium version of Xero, so I have the option of creating other currencies, but I haven't set any up, and this invoice is actually in British pounds, so I'm leaving that as it is. And the prices that I'm putting in here are going to be tax exclusive or VAT exclusive, so I'm leaving that as it is. If you wanted to put them in as tax inclusive, then you can choose this and put the tax inclusive price in here. I have a list of inventory items that I've already set up, which would fill in these lines all the way across with the details I'd put in here. But the product that I have purchased is not in my inventory items, so I'm not going to use this column. So I'm going to use a description, and Smart Agency actually do all my digital designs for my advertising and marketing. So I'm going to say design and print flyer, and there's only one price on the invoice, so I just put the quantity 1, and it's we can say £250, and that's exclusive of VAT. Now I need to choose a code from my chart of accounts. If I know the code that I want, I can start typing its name, or I can enter the number of the code. If I'm not sure what I want to post or allocate this to, I can click on the drop down, and I have all my expenses accounts at the top from my chart of accounts. I actually have all my chart of accounts here, but the expenses, because I'm creating a purchase invoices, are at the top. And I say, oh yes, I've got advertising and marketing, so I can use that one. Now this is the default VAT on this code here. So if that's correct, I can continue without changing anything. But if this supplier wasn't actually VAT registered, I would need to change this, because there'd be no VAT on the purchase invoice. And so then I would need to actually choose 0 rated expenses, so that it would show in the net price, this price without VAT, would show in the correct box on the VAT return. If I chose no VAT, it wouldn't show on any of the boxes at all, which would be incorrect. So I'll choose 0 rated expenses. And you can see there is no VAT on here now. Then the tracking category has already been set up. It's optional to set up tracking categories with regions. And this I'm not going to allocate any of the regions because it's actually at my head office. So I'm going to leave that blank. Now I just need to check that this is the total price that's on my purchase invoice and just check that's correct. If there was VAT, you need to just make sure the VAT matches the amount that's on the purchase invoice as well. And you can see I can have as many lines as I wish by adding more lines. If I make a mistake, I can just take a line off, and so that when I finished, it looks just like the invoice I've received from my supplier. I can save it as a draft if I've not finished, or I'm not sure that I've entered the information correctly, which means it's saved but it hasn't gone into the reports. Or I can save it as an approved invoice, which means it does go to all the reports, and then it's sat waiting to be paid. Now, once my invoice is approved, I can actually print this out if I want to, if I actually file paper copies, or if for whatever reason I would need to do that. And I also have an options button at the right hand corner here. Now I can void this invoice if I want to, which it means it will still stay in the list if I listed all the purchase invoices I'd created, but it would have void next to it. The other way to either, if I'd made a mistake and this was all incorrect, I could just add a credit note, a full credit note, to also negate this invoice. Or if I had been issued a credit note against this invoice, I could create one from this add credit note as well. I can edit this invoice. When there's no payment on an invoice, I can edit anything that I want to, even though the invoice has been approved. If I receive another invoice from Smart Agency, which is very similar, instead of typing it all out again, I can copy this invoice and use it as a basis for a new one. I can also use this invoice as a template for a repeating invoice. So maybe I had flyers designed and print every month. I could set this up so that Xero would create it for me every month without me having to do it as well. So those are my options. Now, normally I would mark the invoice as paid once the payment appears on the bank statement. But maybe if I'm paying by cheque and it might not appear on my bank statement for quite some time, I might want to fill out the bottom here and create the transaction that is the payment, which means I can amend this if I only make a part payment, but it defaults to the full amount. I just need to put in the date that I'm making the payment and then choose which bank account I'm making the payment from. And if it was a cheque, I can put a cheque number in here because this is a reference box, which is a free type box, and I can add the payment. And then I will have created the payment transaction. And when it does appear on my bank statement, I can then actually reconcile it or match it off against the statement line.